Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. Picture a young man years ago squeezed onto a crowded train rumbling through India. He'd just spent an entire year on this grand spiritual quest, searching for enlightenment, but instead of finding inner peace, he'd only found despair and sickness. He was painfully thin, completely lost, and felt utterly hopeless. His destination was Calcutta, and he'd just read that the city was flooded with 100,000 homeless refugees. Not exactly the uplifting ending to his journey he'd hoped for. He arrived late at night to a scene that broke his heart. Everywhere he looked, bodies wrapped in sheets were sleeping shoulder to shoulder on the streets. He checked into the cheapest hotel he could find, dreading the morning, wondering how on earth he could face such overwhelming desperation when he had absolutely nothing to give. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. When he finally dragged himself downstairs the next day, the scene had completely transformed. The streets were alive and buzzing with energy. Families were gathered on blankets, cooking meals on little stoves, talking and laughing with this incredible vitality. And then he saw something that would burn itself into his memory forever. Children were crawling all over their parents, especially their fathers, in these playful, affectionate games. And the fathers, they seemed to be loving every single second of it. In that moment, he was hit with this strange cocktail of feelings: relief, delight, and then this deep, unsettling anxiety. It would take him 10 years to finally understand what that feeling was. It was envy. Pure, aching envy. He was envious of this beautiful display of family love, a love he had never experienced or even witnessed before. This man was Pete Walker, and that moment on a street in Calcutta became the beginning of a lifelong quest to understand the invisible wounds left by a loveless childhood. That quest eventually led him to write the book we're diving into today, Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving. Now, this isn't just a book for people with a formal diagnosis. Think of it more as a map for anyone who feels lost, anxious, or perpetually stuck, but can't quite figure out why. It's for those who grew up feeling like something essential was missing, for those whose childhood home felt more like a battlefield than a sanctuary. By the end of our journey today, you'll understand the hidden architecture of childhood trauma, and you'll walk away with a powerful set of tools to begin rebuilding your inner world. This is more than just a summary. It's a guide to reclaiming the person you were always meant to be. So, what exactly is complex PTSD? You've probably heard of PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. It's often associated with soldiers returning from war or survivors of a single, terrifying event like a car crash or assault. But Pete Walker introduces us to something different, something deeper, and way more subtle. Complex PTSD, or CPTSD for short, doesn't come from a single event. It's born from long-term, repeated trauma, where there was no escape, and most often, that trauma happened within a person's own family during childhood. And here's the thing. This isn't just about physical abuse. Walker makes it crystal clear that ongoing emotional neglect, verbal abuse, and living in a constant atmosphere of fear or contempt can be just as damaging, if not more so. It's this slow, steady erosion of a child's sense of safety and self-worth. But here's the most important thing Walker tells us right from the start, and I want you to really hear this. CPTSD is a learned set of responses. It's not a genetic flaw. It's not a permanent defect in your character. It's not who you are. It's what you learned to do to survive. And because it was learned, it can be unlearned. What wasn't given to you by your parents can now be given to yourself. The most defining feature of CPTSD is something called an emotional flashback. Unlike the flashbacks you see in movies, these don't usually have a visual component. You don't see the past playing out before your eyes, you feel it. An emotional flashback is this sudden and often overwhelming regression back to the feeling states of your childhood. One moment you're a capable adult handling your day, and the next, you're plunged into the intense fear, shame, loneliness, or rage of a helpless child. Walker shares his own first experience of identifying one of these flashbacks. He was living with his first serious partner, and one day she unexpectedly started yelling at him. He describes the feeling as this: fierce hot wind that felt like it was blowing his very insides out. He felt terrified, completely disoriented, and very, very small. It took him 10 years to understand what had actually happened in that moment. He had flashed back to the hundreds of times his mother had blasted him with her rage, leaving him feeling helpless and terrified. When you're in an emotional flashback, life suddenly feels impossible. Tasks that are normally easy feel like climbing Mount Everest. You feel fragile, exposed, and desperately want to hide from the world. And this is often coated with a thick layer of what Walker calls toxic shame. Toxic shame is so much more than just feeling embarrassed about something you did. It's this deep, gut-wrenching conviction that you are fundamentally flawed, worthless, ugly, or stupid. It's that voice that whispers relentlessly, "There's something wrong with me." But here's the truth. This shame isn't actually yours. It's a flashback to the contempt or neglect you experienced from a parent. Walker tells this heartbreaking story about David, a handsome and intelligent professional actor who came to him after a failed audition, completely distraught. David confessed, "I know that I'm really very ugly. It is so stupid that I'm trying to be an actor when I'm so painful to look at." Walker was genuinely shocked because David was objectively good-looking. But as he learned about David's childhood, filled with abuse and neglect, where his alcoholic father looked at him with disgust and his older brother constantly taunted him, it all made sense. David wasn't seeing himself. He was seeing the reflection his family had shown him his entire life. This toxic shame, combined with overwhelming fear and this deep, deadened feeling of hopelessness, creates what Walker calls the abandonment melange. Think of it as a swirling vortex of painful emotions that sits at the very core of a flashback. Now you might be wondering, why do people react so differently to difficult childhoods? Some people seem to become angry and controlling, while others become anxious perfectionists, and still others just seem to disappear into themselves. This brings us to one of the most powerful ideas in the entire book, the 4 F's. Walker explains that our instinctual response to danger isn't just fight or flight like you probably learned in school. It's actually a 4-part response: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. In a healthy person with a safe childhood, all 4 of these are available and used when appropriate. But a child, trapped in a chronically traumatic environment, will often over-rely on one of these responses to survive, and it becomes their default coping mechanism well into adulthood. To understand this better, let's look at the story of a family with 4 children: Bob, Carol, Maud, and Sean. Their story perfectly illustrates how these 4 types are formed in real life. First, there's the fight type. This is Bob, the older brother and the family hero. Fight types learn that power and control can create a sense of safety. They respond to threats with anger and aggression, often developing what psychologists call a narcissistic defense. They try to control others to avoid feeling abandoned. Bob, who was constantly pushed to be perfect by his parents, learned to scapegoat his sister Carol, just as his parents did. He grew up to be a controlling bully who demanded perfection from everyone around him. Next is the flight type. This is Carol, the family scapegoat. Flight types are your perfectionists and workaholics. They believe, deep down, that if they can just be perfect enough, work hard enough, achieve enough, they will finally be safe and lovable. They are constantly busy, literally running from their inner pain, through obsessive thinking and compulsive doing. As a child, Carol was constantly punished for making noise or exploring like kids naturally do, so she retreated into the backyard, busying herself for hours to avoid getting in trouble. At school, this anxiety morphed into an obsessive approach to her work, turning her into a straight-A student, but she was driven by fear, not joy. Then we have the freeze type. This is Maud, the lost child, of the family. Freeze types respond to danger by dissociating, basically by checking out mentally and emotionally. They learned pretty early that resistance was completely futile, so they gave up and retreated into the worlds of sleep, daydreaming, or endless hours of television and video games. Maud was mostly ignored by her parents, which is its own form of abuse. She found her only comfort in food and fantasy, hiding in her room to avoid her bullying brother. She learned to numb her pain by disconnecting from reality, essentially bonding with her television instead of a human being. Finally, there's the fawn type. This is Sean, the youngest child. Fawn types are the classic codependents. They learn that they can gain a small measure of safety by completely giving up their own needs and becoming helpful servants to their parents. They merge with the wishes and demands of others, losing themselves in the process. Sean had a natural sense of compassion, and he figured out that if he could anticipate his mother's needs, he could sometimes calm her down and make her less dangerous to be around. He became an expert at reading her moods, essentially sacrificing his own childhood to manage his parents' emotions. Most of us are actually a hybrid of these types, with one dominant response and a backup. Understanding your primary trauma response is like finding a key to a locked room in your own house. It begins to explain so many of your automatic reactions. Why you might work until you literally collapse. Why you might isolate yourself when you feel overwhelmed. Why you might always put others' needs before your own. Or why you might lash out in anger when you feel threatened. Now, whether you're a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn type, there's one thing every survivor has in common: a relentless inner critic. Walker describes the inner critic as the superego gone bad. It's basically the internalized voice of your abusive or neglectful parents, now living rent-free inside your head. This critic is on this desperate, impossible mission to make you absolutely perfect so that you can finally win the love and safety you never got as a child. But here's the cruel twist. Because that goal is completely impossible, the critic eventually turns on you. It becomes this source of constant self-hate, self-disgust, and self-abandonment. It blames you for everything, just as you were blamed as a child. This inner critic has two primary modes of attack: perfectionism and endangerment. The perfectionism attacks are driven by toxic shame. They torture you with things like all-or-nothing thinking, where one small mistake means you are a complete failure. You get a 99 on a test and obsess about the missing 1%. There are unfair comparisons, where you constantly measure yourself against others or against your own best moments and always come up short. And there's straight-up self-hate and name-calling. This is when the critic uses the same cruel language your parents used on you, but now you're using it on yourself. You spill a glass of water and instantly call yourself a world-class spaz, triggering this downward spiral of shame. The endangerment attacks are fueled by fear. They keep you in a state of constant hypervigilance, always scanning for danger. These attacks include drasticizing and catastrophizing. This is the critic as a horror movie producer. A strange look from your boss doesn't just mean he's having a bad day. In your mind, it means you're about to be fired, become homeless, and end up living on the street. There's negative focus, where your brain becomes like Velcro for bad news and Teflon for good news. You ignore all your successes and focus only on your flaws or potential problems. And there's time urgency, this constant panicked feeling that you need to rush, that you're always behind schedule, because danger is supposedly just around the corner. So how do you fight back against this inner tyrant that's been running your life? Walker gives us two powerful tools: thought stopping and thought correction. Thought stopping is exactly what it sounds like. It's about using your anger to reclaim your own mind. When you catch the critic attacking you, you mentally shout something like, "No," or "Stop," or even something stronger if you need to. You turn the anger of the attack back onto the critic itself. This is you, as an adult, finally standing up to the bully that you couldn't fight as a child. Walker emphasizes that this isn't about being nice to the critic, at least not at first. It's about drawing a hard boundary and refusing to be abused any longer. Thought correction follows right after. Once you've stopped the attack, you replace the critic's toxic message with a positive, realistic one. This is where you need a prepared list of your own positive qualities and accomplishments. When the critic calls you a failure, you counter with something like, "That's not true. I am a good enough person. I graduated from school, I have good friends, I'm kind to animals." In the middle of a flashback, your brain often can't access this positive information on its own, which is exactly why having a written list can be a lifesaver. Shrinking the critic is the fight of a lifetime, a process of thousands of small skirmishes, but with each battle you win, you reclaim a piece of your own mind. As you begin to quiet the critic, you create space for the next, deeper level of healing, grieving. Grieving, Walker says, is the key process for reconnecting with your repressed emotional intelligence. Many of us were literally punished for showing our feelings as children. The classic line, "Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about," taught us loud and clear that our pain was unacceptable, so we learned to shut it down completely. Recovery means learning to feel again, but this time, safely. Walker breaks down healthy grieving into 4 interconnected processes. First is angering. This isn't about destructive rage or punching holes in walls. It's about reclaiming your healthy fight response. It's about allowing yourself to feel genuine rage about the injustices of your childhood, the betrayal, the neglect, the humiliation. This anger is actually what fuels your self-protection. It's the energy that helps you say no to unfairness, both from your inner critic and from people in your life today who might try to take advantage of you. Second is crying. Crying is the yin to anger's yang. When we're hurt, we naturally feel both mad and sad. Tears are actually the ultimate self-soothing mechanism. They release fear, and most importantly, they awaken our dormant capacity for self-compassion. When you can cry for the little child you were, and for the pain you still carry today, you are remothering yourself in the most profound way. Third is verbal ventilation. This is what Walker calls the golden path to intimacy. It's the process of putting actual words to your feelings, of speaking your pain out loud to a safe and trusted person, whether that's a friend, a partner, or a therapist. When we were children, we had no one to tell. Now, sharing our story helps us realize we are not alone in this. It's the antidote to the toxic shame that tells us to hide. Reciprocal verbal ventilation, where 2 people can share their vulnerabilities safely with each other, is the very definition of true intimacy. And fourth is feeling. This is a quieter, more passive process. It's about learning to simply stay present with the physical sensations of an emotion in your body without immediately reacting or dissociating. It's about relaxing into the pain instead of tensing against it. This practice, which is a form of somatic mindfulness, helps your body learn that feelings are just energy moving through you. They can't actually hurt you. Over time, it allows you to metabolize and dissolve painful emotional states that used to completely overwhelm you. These 4 processes work together to heal the deepest wound of all, what Walker calls the abandonment depression. This isn't just regular sadness. It's this deep, death-like feeling of helplessness and hopelessness that comes from profound emotional neglect. Walker gives us a map of how we typically react to this core wound. It starts with the abandonment depression at the center. This triggers fear and shame. The fear and shame then fuel the inner critic. And the inner critic launches us into one of the 4F responses. This is the cycle of reactivity that keeps us trapped in survival mode. The goal of recovery is to learn to stay with the feelings of depression and fear without immediately launching into this self-destructive cycle. It's about learning to comfort yourself through the storm instead of running from it or attacking yourself for having feelings in the first place. And this brings us to the final, crucial piece of the puzzle: relational healing. Since PTSD is fundamentally an attachment disorder born from unsafe relationships, the healing must also happen in relationships. This doesn't have to be a therapist, though that can be incredibly helpful. It can be a trusted friend, a supportive partner, or even a loving pet who offers you unconditional acceptance. The process of healing in a relationship is called reparenting. You are essentially giving to your inner child what your actual parents could not or would not give. This has two parts: self-mothering and self-fathering. Self-mothering is about cultivating deep self-compassion. It's about building this unshakable belief that you are lovable and deserving of love, exactly as you are. It's the practice of being genuinely kind to yourself, especially when you make mistakes or feel bad. Walker provides this beautiful list of reparenting affirmations that you can say to your inner child. Things like, "I am so glad you were born. You do not have to be perfect to get my love and protection. All of your feelings are okay with me." Self-fathering, on the other hand, is about building self-protection and healthy assertiveness. It's about learning to stand up for yourself, to set firm boundaries, and to confront abuse when it happens. One powerful exercise Walker suggests is what he calls the time machine rescue operation. You imagine traveling back in time to rescue your child self from a traumatic situation. You tell that child, "I will stop them from hurting you. I will call the police if I have to. I will protect you." This imagery helps heal those deep wounds of helplessness that were created when no one came to help you. Ultimately, recovery from complex PTSD is not about finding some magic cure that makes everything instantly better. It's about building a toolkit of skills and practices. And the most important tool in that kit is the ability to manage emotional flashbacks when they happen. Walker provides 13 practical steps for doing just that. The full list is in the book and is a powerful resource, but let's touch on the core ideas here. When you feel a flashback starting, the first and most important step is to say to yourself, "I am having a flashback." This simple act of naming it engages your thinking brain and reminds you that the overwhelming feelings are memories from the past, not actual dangers in the present moment. Next, you remind yourself, "I feel afraid, but I am not in danger right now. You are safe now, in your adult body, with resources and choices you never had as a child." You then speak reassuringly to your inner child, letting them know you are there to comfort and protect them. And you deconstruct what Walker calls eternity thinking, which is that feeling that this pain will last forever. You remind yourself, this flashback will pass, as it always has before. You also learn to resist the inner critic's attacks with thought stopping and thought correction. And you allow yourself to grieve, turning your tears into self-compassion and your anger into self-protection. The journey of recovery is long and winding. It's often 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But as you practice these tools consistently, flashbacks become less frequent, less intense, and shorter in duration. You gradually move from a life of merely surviving to one where you can truly begin to thrive. And here's something beautiful that Walker points out. There are actually incredible silver linings to this journey. Survivors who do this work often develop a level of emotional intelligence, self-compassion, and capacity for deep intimacy that is far beyond what most people ever achieve. By facing the darkness of your past, you can find a light within yourself that is brighter and more resilient than you ever imagined possible. As we come to the end of our exploration of complex PTSD, from surviving to thriving, it's worth taking a moment to reflect on the profound message at its heart. More than just a clinical guide, this book is really a declaration of hope. Its most powerful lesson is this: your pain makes sense. The anxiety, the shame, the feeling of being fundamentally broken, these are not signs of your defectiveness. They are the logical, intelligent adaptations of a child who survived an impossible situation. Pete Walker gives us a language for our suffering. Before this book, so many people felt lost in this fog of confusing symptoms, often getting misdiagnosed with a dozen different labels that never quite fit their experience. By giving us concepts like emotional flashback, and the 4Fs. Walker hands us a map and a compass. Suddenly, the chaotic landscape of our inner world begins to have recognizable landmarks. We can see where we are, how we got here, and most importantly, the path forward. What makes this book so genuinely transformative is its compassionate pragmatism. It doesn't just explain the what and the why of trauma. It provides an exhaustive toolkit for the how of healing. The 13 steps for managing flashbacks, the 14 attacks of the inner critic, the 4 processes of grieving. These are not abstract theories you have to interpret. They are concrete, actionable tools you can begin using today, right now. The book is truly a manual for self-reclamation. But perhaps the most beautiful and enduring idea is that of reparenting. The notion that you, as an adult right now, can provide the love, protection, and compassion that your inner child was denied is incredibly empowering. It reframes healing not as a process of fixing something broken inside you, but as a process of nurturing something that was never allowed to grow in the first place. It is an act of profound kindness to yourself. So how can you begin to apply these lessons in your own life, starting right now? First, simply begin to notice. Start listening for the voice of your inner critic. You don't have to fight it just yet if that feels overwhelming. Just observe it like you're a curious scientist. When does it show up? What does it say? What situations trigger it? Recognizing its patterns is the first step to disarming it. Second, get curious about your trauma response. When you feel stressed, scared, or overwhelmed, which of the 4Fs do you tend to use? Do you get angry and controlling, like the fight type? Do you bury yourself in work or busyness, like the flight type? Do you shut down and hide, like the freeze type? Or do you start trying to please everyone around you, like the fawn type? Simply identifying your go-to survival strategy is a huge leap in self-awareness. And third, the next time you feel a wave of overwhelming emotion, fear, shame, or sadness that seems way out of proportion to the situation you're actually in, try practicing that very first step of flashback management. Just say to yourself, silently or out loud, "I am having an emotional flashback." This one sentence can be a lifeline. It creates a sliver of separation between you and the feeling, reminding you that what you're experiencing is a memory playing out in your body, not a present-day reality. That was a summary of Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. We've covered the core ideas today, but here's the thing. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the landmarks and the main roads, but it can never replace the actual experience of walking the paths, breathing the air, and discovering the hidden trails for yourself. The real power of this book is in the way its ideas settle in your mind over time, in the personal connections you make with its stories, and in those aha moments that spring up when you least expect them. This summary is your starting point, your introduction. If anything we've discussed today has sparked a sense of recognition, or even just a flicker of hope, I really encourage you to get a copy of the book. Reading it isn't just about gaining knowledge. It's an act of deep compassion for yourself, an experience that can truly illuminate the path from just surviving to fully thriving. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please show your support by liking this summary and subscribing to Billionaire's Bookshelf. Your engagement really does help us continue to explore these incredible works and bring their wisdom to more people. Let's keep learning and growing together.